Improvisation Center back again on a wet and sort of cool wintry pre-spring day with, as you can see, the Elco. Yep, the 76 El Camino. Been a minute before we got back to this thing, but we're now back to this thing. And as you can see, what's in front of us is a gas tank. We have to put a sending unit on this thing, and thanks to eBay, I got a sending unit, along with a gauge to go with the sending unit, all aftermarket junk, so we can at least be able to see what our fuel levels are on this, because the fuel gauge in there is crap, and I don't feel like spending $100 plus for a replacement sending unit either way. But not throwing this away either. This is going to actually be our fuel pickup since I need this. I'm going to put this back in there, probably chop this old sending unit head off here and just retain the tube and everything, put it back in here and hook the fuel line up to it. Until I could find some kind of aftermarket screen, sock, whatever to put on here, I'm pretty much stuck with this as is. Yeah, got to put this back on. Chop a hole in the top, put our sending unit on as well, get everything adjusted right with our float, and mount the tank back up. We've already got fuel lines running there as well, so we'll be able to hook that up to this. And I have to run a wire from the sending unit up to the front and install our gauge as well. So, yep, our first stage is going to be getting this fuel tank done. After that, we got a lot more to do on this thing, but it's in the engine bay. So let's get this crap done. Our first thing we got to do is take our little gasket here for our sending unit. Already traced the hole right here with a marker. And this is where our aftermarket sending unit's going, right here. Go ahead and take my hole saw and chop a hole in this thing. Okay, at first I tried to use this hole saw to cut the hole in here. That didn't work out all too well because, let's see if we can focus here. I don't know, well, either way, the teeth on the hole saw are flattening out from trying to cut into this. This hole saw sucks. Then I went ahead, used the step bit right there, drilled a bigger hole right in the middle. Then try to use a jigsaw with a small metal cutting blade. The little metal cutting blade was made in a way where it would not rest against this little roller right here, so it kept getting chucked off, and it is now lost in hell somewhere inside this gas tank. So the last thing I did was take our reciprocating saw and chop this jagged, disgusting, ugly hole in the spot. Now I have to go ahead and use this roller grinding wheel right here and try to smooth this out as much as I can before putting all our junk together. So that's what's next with this. Gotta improvise, I guess. Need to have the sending unit head adjusted way up, because when this goes down, even with a shorter stem on our float, it's going to be touching the bottom. I want it to try to register empty when there's still fuel in there. So I have to adjust this way up, but at the same time, this excess needs to come off so I can actually get the damn thing in there. So now I got to get the death wheel. Alright, got our hole ground down around the edges to make it look a little bit better. Go ahead and do a quick look-see at that. There we go. Still looks like shit, as far as the circular action there, but it is smooth enough that you're not going to cut your hands on it. And our gasket fits pretty good right there, so that's straight. Then took our sending unit. I adjusted the sending unit head all the way up, cut this excess off, took our float, trimmed the excess rod off, and put it in here short. Now when it goes in there, it's about like that, so more than likely we're going to end up still having our gauge read probably quarter tank when it's actually bone dry. But the main thing is, when it comes up, it has to come all the way up to there before it registers true full, which is preferable, because then as the thing goes down, it'll, by the time it gets to where it's about critical at quarter tank, it'll probably start reading half a tank or a third of a tank. As with any of these pieced together builds, you pretty much learn the quirks of everything, so you'll know how to operate. So in the case of our fuel gauge, we're just going to have to deal with the idea that when the gauge gets down to around a half a tank, you better fill up. I do the same thing with the Monte Carlo. So now, with this all done, go ahead, place this down, and probably going to use some self-tapping screws to get this thing in here and bolt it down. Well, got our old sending unit modified. I was able to more or less break off the old sending unit head. It ended up making a little bitty hole on the side of the tube where it was tack welded in place, so I had to put this short piece of rubber hose on here to help cover up that little bitty hole so this thing don't suck up air when the tank runs down. Anyway, we got this taken care of. This is set to where it's maybe an inch above the bottom of the tank, so it won't be right on the bottom, but low enough that we could still just about suck the tank down to the bottom dry. Anyway, got that crap all together. Got our O-ring in place. Got our other gasket here. This is all set. We can put this shit together. Okay, got our gas tank hung back up. Straps all in. Our filler tube is really a free floating setup where it stops right here by the filler door, so you just open it, put your gas spout in there, yada yada. As far as, let's get to a position here. As far as under here, we got our hose. We got our hose right here hooked up to the old sending unit, which is hooked up to our fuel pump, so it could draw off of it as intended. And this white wire right here is the line coming from the new sending unit for the fuel gauge, and we got that wire tied around there. I'm kind of like upside down right now, and it's going around the same path as the fuel pump power wire. I'm gonna have to go to the other side under there and continue to zip tie everything and route this white wire through the firewall to the cab so we can hook it up to the fuel gauge, which I also have to mount as well. So let me get from under here, move my tarp, and secure the rest of this wire. Okay, we got our fuel gauge installed, hooked up, and conveniently I was able to actually do something that I remembered I wanted to see if I could do in the first place, which was actually use this little sheet metal panel that I installed in order to put our horn switch in for a spot to put our fuel gauge in. Well, you can see all the wiring and shit, even the wiring for the light inside the thing, all stretched down through there. I figured I'd spare you the boredom of me trying to position a camera under the dash to watch me splicing wires and stuff, because we had enough of that in the past. But see if I can move this panel here carefully. As you can see, we have a fuel gauge on the sheet metal panel in this dash panel right here. Fuel system is pretty much done. Our fuel tank is in, and the fuel sending unit is in. The old sending unit is modified to serve as a pickup. All that crap is in, along with our fuel gauge. So now, once this is all back together, we're going to move on to the engine bay. So let me get this crap put back together real quick, and I will catch you in the engine bay. Okay, before we get started with the engine, just want to point out that we salvaged some parts from another older generation 305 in the garage that the heads are compatible with our intake. And along with that, I also managed to grab all the accessories, the brackets and actual accessories and everything. So we can technically put the whole engine together as far as being able to function, minus the radiator, because I do need a radiator. But we pretty much have everything necessary. That also includes our intake right there. And I also have this extra set of exhaust manifolds that have a little bit of a flange port on there still bolted on, and I'll probably end up using these on the premise that this allows me to more easily attach some exhaust pipe to it with couplings to make an actual exhaust system, rather than trying to source an entire section of pipe with the flange end on it and everything. So with all our stuff, we can go ahead and do our disassembly and reassembly. So let's do it. Alright, got all the head bolts off. Small block Chevy engines, unlike the Ford engines, have a lot more head bolts. There's a row of bolts along the bottom on the outside, and there's 2 rows of bolts under the valve cover, so way more bolts to pull off. And I also had to take the rocker arms off in order to access one of the rows of bolts, because the rocker arms were too close together to get my socket in there. But we got them all off, so now go ahead and knock these things off, get them off and out of my way, so we can move on with cleaning everything up for reassembly. Alright, got our heads off. As you can see, everything is relatively clean. All the cylinder walls look pretty good. No excessive rust anywhere. Like I said, this engine actually ran, so we should just be able to put our other heads back on. We could reassemble all the other junk and get this engine together where it will be able to run just like it did before. First, I just have to clean off these surfaces though, so go ahead and move all these parts out of the way, so that'll be a little easier. So go ahead and get all that done. Okay, took a second to scrape off the bottoms of these heads here, along with the top of the block here, to get everything cleaned up. Cleaned out the lifter valley a little bit, make sure there's no loose dirt or anything in there, so we can put everything together and at least be confident enough that everything is well slicked up, as you can see from the glistening lifter valley. But we got everything prepped up, put the head gaskets on, and set these jokers down and start putting bolts in. And then we'll go through the torque sequence afterward. Okay, we got our heads down and only snugged up on the bolts, and we got to do our torque sequence. Now, because this thing has 3 rows of bolts, there's a little bit of a different sequence. We still start in the middle, however, and we're going to go in 3 torque sessions, but it'll be a case of, let's see if I can see the bolts here. It's like 1, 2, 3. You know, you start in the middle, go up, down, and just kind of work your way like normal, except you have a lot more bolts. But again, 3 torque sessions. I think it's like 25, 55, and 75, some shit like that. But I'll do one head and I'll do the other one off camera. But go ahead and remount this camera and get this left side head torqued down. Okay, we've got our trusty torque wrench right here, and we're doing 25, 45, 65. Start dead center right here is number 1 at 25. Then we jump over to here. This is number 2, 25. Number 3 is at the bottom here, right in the middle of the bottom row. 25. Number 4 is right next to it. 25. Then we come back up here for number 5. That one. Number 6 is, let's see, where's number 6? Actually, this one's number 5. That one's number 6. Already snug. 16. And 17. Alright. All our head bolts are torqued down for the driver's side. I will move on to the passenger side, and I will catch you in a second. Stand by. Alright. Got our cylinder heads torqued down. All 17 bolts on each cylinder head are down to 65 foot-pounds. So now with that, our next move is going to be to clean the surfaces for our intake, get our gaskets glued down, and get our intake glued and bolted down and torqued down as well. And at the same time, well, before that, I need to put our push rods in. So get all that mess done, and we can keep moving along in the assembly of this thing. So stand by again. Okay, got our intake gaskets glued down, gooped up on both sides. We also have our push rods in. Rocker arms are snugged down. They'll have to be properly tightened. I'll do that later. Go through that. But right now, go ahead and put our intake on, get the bolts in, get it all snugged down, and conclude that part of the project. So, get my camera set back up and get it done. Intake bolted down. You can see all the gasket maker oozing out of the sides and everything. Better too much than too little. Got our bolts secured everywhere as stated. Did the thing where I go around a few times to make sure all the bolts are snugged down properly, because as you start tightening them down, bolts on the opposite side tend to loosen up as the intake shifts around. So we got that all taken care of. Now, with that done, before I move on to twisting the engine around in order to do our valve lash adjustments, which I'll say for more or less last, I'm going to go ahead and start putting all our accessory junk back on. Got our water pump, then we got our accessory brackets, all that good shit. Go ahead and start putting that stuff back on. Alright, we got our water pump here set up. We have our new gaskets in place, glued on. I'll apply a little more gasket maker around the outside. Then we can go ahead and slap this stuff on to the front of our engine. And from there, I'll move on with regular accessories. So, next. as is the case with an old accessory bracket setup that's composed of multiple pieces, I get to play puzzle time and figure out how this shit went back together. Yeah, that is my fault for not taking a good batch of pictures of the old shit before I disassembled it. Dumbass me. But now I get to have the fun of putting all this shit back together, and I'm probably getting it figured out, but we're going to just go ahead and start piecing stuff back together a little at a time, fitting stuff as necessary. So, let's go. Okay, we had us a little problem. That so-called last bracket that I had was not actually part of this setup. It was actually the bracket that came off the power steering pump from the Monte Carlo's similar configuration when we first got that car. It was literally the power steering bracket from this side, from the middle, back that way. Not a whole complete bracket like this one. Different configuration, but from the same era. So I don't even know if I even had the rear bracket that went on here. So that's neither here or there. Still need something to support the rear of this power steering pump in this setup. So what am I gonna do? Well, improvise shit. Yep, these brackets right here are some salvage brackets that used to be on the 302 Ford engine that is currently in the FMT, and were part of a truck accessory configuration on that engine initially. Since I didn't need these brackets anymore, I set them aside for just this type of occasion where, well, I might need to make something. And in this case, it's going to be making a power steering pump bracket for our Chevy shit. And the one I'm using in particular is this piece here, because it's got this slotted corner right here that will allow me to put a bolt right here to get this adjustment right here. By using the slotted piece right here, I can achieve that adjustment setting and at the same time take advantage of these two bolt mounting points right here on this bracket. Of course, that means I'm going to have to trim off some excess from this piece here and drill a couple of holes in here in order to accommodate these two bolt holes. So that means more reconstructive surgery. So in the meantime, I'm going to turn this camera off, drill some holes, cut some metal off, and make the final finished product to go on this shit right here, so we can hold this pump at least as snug as we need to achieve what we're trying to do, which is the reassembly of the accessories. So I'm gonna go ahead and get to it. Stand by. Okay, here's what I came up with out of that piece of metal I previously showed you. Got this thing trimmed down, a couple extra holes drilled in. Unfortunately, I couldn't use this hole right here that was originally in there because, well, this ain't exactly made for this application. But as we're going to show, this thing will bolt right here with the use of some washers, nuts and bolts, shit like that. And then our slotted area, let's get a good spot, our slotted area right here will intersect with this threaded bung right here on the power steering bracket to hold a bolt, with a spacer, of course, between the bracket and the power steering bracket in order to allow me to slide adjust the thing accordingly. And when I put tension on the power steering pump, it comes to about, I would say it probably comes to about a 1/4 of an inch to a 1/3 of an inch away from the edge of this bracket, so I don't have to trim this down anymore. Now I would imagine with that belt that's on there, that belt is probably stretched already, so a brand new belt's probably going to give me even more spacing. It's going to give me more space in between the power steering pump body and the bracket here, so we won't have any clearance issues. But with this little thing here fabricated, oh, another thing I had to do, I had to grind down this ridge or bump or whatever the hell you want to call it, because you got a bit of a flaring on this bracket right here, and it kind of interfered with this thing some. So it's just another little thing I had to do to help make this piece fit better. But this is done. gonna put this shit together, and hopefully everything will seem to be good. I'll snug it all up, pull on it, yank on it, move it around, see if it gives any. That'll let me know whether this shit's gonna actually work when this engine is running at high speed. So let me get this together. Stand by. Alright, got our bracket on, as stated before. Got a bolt through here with some washers behind it for spacing purposes. And we got a long bolt here with a lock washer, lock nut to hold everything together here. Washer on the other end. We got another bolt here coming in this way from the back side with another big nut to serve as a spacer going into the power steering pump bracket. And then of course we got our two bolt and a nut right here holding it under natural circumstances, and thing seems pretty sturdy. It's actually holding on pretty good. Belt's got tension on it and all. This is a double belt pulley, so I can always put two belts or stick with one, but this thing is actually on like it needs to be. So with this thing done, I can go ahead and move on and put our water pump pulley and belt on and actually conclude this segment of the engine reassembly, minus the exhaust manifolds. I just got to get some gaskets for these, and I'll be able to get those on, put our distributor in, and that'll probably be about as far as I could go on this until I get some more parts, because, well, I need more parts. So we'll go ahead and get our water pump junk together, and like I say, I could throw the distributor in as well. Stand by. Okay, got our our water pump on, or not water pump, our water pump pulley and fan clutch on. Had to add some new bolts to it because the ones that were in there were kind of shitty, but got them on there. Kind of a bad focus, but and the sunlight's in at our backside here, but yeah, we got bolts in, got the pulley on, got the fan clutch on, have the belt on. Everything is on for the water pump. So, with the water pump taken care of, I move on to exhaust manifolds. But there was a slight problem. Apparently, if I'm not mistaken, these cylinder heads come from like a probably either early 80s or pre-80s small block Chevy. And apparently the exhaust manifolds that I have, which come off of late 80s and up small block Chevy, the bolt pattern for the exhaust manifolds does not line up. You'll get the middle ones in, you'll get one side in, and the other ones are kind of off by probably a quarter of an inch, eighth of an inch, something like that. Well, that means either A, I would have to try to source some exhaust manifolds from an early generation small block Chevy or headers, which would totally negate the whole purpose of even doing any of this shit, because I was trying to get away from having to spend a couple $100 on a different intake to use on the newer cylinder heads. So, what improvised, bootleg, half-ass way did I come up with to address newer exhaust manifolds on older cylinder heads? Yep. Reaming shit out. Let me get a better position here on this driver's side cylinder head. Yep. Chop the sides out so I could get some extra spacing for one bolt, and then use the grinding disc to gouge out some of the material here close to the wall of the port, so I could be able to get the bolt in there a little bit better, so it's kind of off center a little bit while the other ones line up like they're supposed to. I did both exhaust manifolds like that, test fitted it several times. It's more or less going to fit. Probably going to have exhaust leaks like a son of a bitch, but until I could actually go ahead and get some better hardware in here, I'm going to have to deal with this shit. So I'm going to go ahead, put these things in permanently with the little 4-piece gaskets for each side, or 3-piece actually, because you got a gasket for this port, a gasket for that port, gasket for that port. I don't really like them, but in this instance, it's probably a good idea to use those gaskets because of all this oddball spacing issue bullshit. So I'm going to go ahead and get this garbage together and try to conclude this whole engine bay fiasco. So stand by. Got our exhaust manifolds in, bolted down, everything more or less worked out as intended, even with our slotted holes. Walk around here, same shit here, slotted holes, got the shit together, got the gaskets in. They actually weren't as bad as expected. As long as you got some bolts already in, you can pretty much bolt your manifolds up 2/3 of the way, leaving just enough of a gap to slip the gaskets in place onto the bolts, because they're made to essentially hook right on top of the bolts, and tighten everything up, and bam, you're done. So exhaust manifolds done, accessories done. Go ahead and just throw our distributor in there just to more or less get it out of my damn way, and we're gonna move on to the inside because I got some seat belt buckle assemblies and a couple seats to put in, so that'll be next. Alright, seated our distributor in place. You might ask, why did I put it in there now instead of waiting until I did the whole top dead center on #1 cylinder thing? Well, it almost doesn't really matter. Just like on the FMT when I did it, wherever the rotor's pointing, that's where we're going to start with #1 cylinder. So it was just as well that I just stuck the thing in there. Like I say, get it out of the way otherwise, get it in place. When we do go and find our timing, wherever the rotor's pointing, that's where we're going to start #1 cylinder. So our distributor is in. Other than the electrical aspects of it and the wires themselves and the vacuum line going to the carb, the distributor is in. Even the little clip holding the distributor down is more or less down enough to hold everything in place. So go ahead and throw these little spark plugs back in on the right side here, and we're going to conclude our little escapade in the engine bay for the time being. And like I said, we're going inside to work on some interior crap. So stand by. Alright, what we got here is a couple of buckle assemblies. They come in 2 recoil spring loaded rolls, and the one buckle piece right here that would snap into this piece right here, which would normally mount right here on the side to coincide with that assembly. These things, one mounting point is right here under this molding where there's a bolt, so I'm going to have to pull this panel off here to really be able to get in here like I need to. I might have to pull this one loose enough to get some spacing as well. Still trying to see exactly. I'm thinking, no, that's a seat mount. I'm not really sure where the hell the other part of this damn buckle goes to. I really don't know enough about a 76 El Camino to know exactly where these damn belt buckles go, so we're gonna pretty much just kind of look around and see if I see any kind of remnants of a mounting point or something where the other buckle roll was secured at. We'll get something figured out though. Got our buckles in. This part here, got this shit in. I did notice that the other point, mounting point for this, is actually on this little piece right here, right where the seat would go. And these bolts that are in here are stuck. So, yeah, I might try to get it out with this, but I'm probably going to either destroy the tool or break the bolt. More than likely destroy the tool. So, what that ends up meaning is I'm probably going to have to just forego this point and make a whole new mounting point and use new nuts and bolts to hold this garbage together. This one unfortunately has rusted away, so there's not even a tab to even bolt anything to. I'm probably going to have to weld some garbage on here or drill a whole nother hole in order to secure this to wherever the heck I bolted to. Same thing on that side, even though we do have the tab on here to secure it to that point right there. But for all intents, all our seatbelt garbage is in, minus those two mounting points. Everything seems to still work, surprisingly, for this age of hardware that's been sitting. So, like I say, I'm going to go ahead, figure out how to take care of that problem, and really get it all mounted down. Then we can look at the seat options that we have. You'll love that shit. Stand by. Okay, good news. We were pleasantly mistaken about the bolts for holding the bottom reel in place for our seat belts. They actually really weren't frozen. They just needed a little extra persuasion in the form of a breaker bar. I was able to get both bolts out. I did wet them up with WD-40 afterwards so they could go back in and at least have a better chance of coming out. But as you can see, we got them both bolted down. This one obviously went down without a hitch. That one I had to weld a large washer to it in order to make this thing look like the other one, so I'll have a mounting point. But it's down, it's secured, it's ready to go. So the next thing we have are the seats. Like I said before, you'll love these. Give me 1 second and I will show you. Yep, these are the seats I'm working with. Get a good angle at them. Kind of the sunlight doesn't do them justice, but these seats look like shit. They just look like somebody smeared their crusty ass all over them and everything. But yeah, they're stained and icky looking. They're going to need to be cleaned up. But the best part about them is they're solid. They're not torn, they're not sunk in or anything. All in all, they're in pretty good shape. They just need to be cleaned. More than likely, what I'm going to do is, after trying to clean them, or at least sanitize them, I'm probably going to hit them with some vinyl fabric paint, spray them up and color them a different color, black, I don't know, if they have any other colors besides black and white. I'll go ahead and get one, you know, like whatever this weird burgundy color is. Nah, I'll probably just do black and stay with it. But yeah, we're going to paint the seats up with some vinyl paint or fabric paint after trying to clean them up and everything. And then we're going to end up having to fabricate seat mounts for these things, because these are some weird ass seat mounts here. And I'm probably going to have to weld some stuff to these things in order to make these things actually fit. So these seats actually came, if I'm not mistaken, they came out of a late model VW Beetle or something. But got them for free a long time ago, so why not? They're seats. We have to make them work, because I don't feel like spending a bunch of money on some aftermarket racing seats or going to the junkyard hoping to find some decent seats that I could make work. So we're going to make this shit work. So go ahead and get some scrap metal and stuff, see what I could cook up. Stand by. Well, it's been a while since we worked on this thing. Probably a good year. Been working on other projects, but we're back. We pick up where we left off. Last time we finished doing a few little odds and ends. Got a distributor in there. Got a few little parts on the engine and everything. Got our oil sender for the oil gauge, all that good stuff. Most of this stuff is pretty much ready to roll on that. Also took a minute to install this salvaged B&M shifter that I had from another old project car. Had to wrestle with that thing a minute because this going on this 700R transmission, and I don't know if I can get a good angle to really see the son of a bitch, but let's see. There we go. Right there, got our linkage hooked up with the bracket that's for GM transmissions. Got that all dialed in, so that actually works. Even though this shifter is only for 3 speeds, we really don't need to worry about shifting all the way down to first gear in the 4-speed transmission. But other than that, also took a minute to hit the auto parts store and junkyard, grabbing a few odds and ends for the engine. Got rad hoses, spark plug wires, thermostat and gasket, a starter from the junkyard, and some flange pipe sections from the stock manifolds. I'll bolt those up and then weld on some exhaust to get a run going back. And I also got a drive shaft, a yoke for a drive shaft. I had to cut it off, and some donuts for the flange pipes and everything, so I could be able to put all that trash on the engine and the transmission in the case of the drive shaft. But once I put all that trash on the engine, all that'll be left is a radiator and some gas and a battery, and hopefully we'll be able to actually make some fire on this thing and get it tuned up and all. And from there, it'll just be brakes and suspension, and of course an actual drive shaft to go with that yoke, and some tires, and this thing should actually be ready to hit some road for testing. So go ahead and start installing all this trash and move along. So stand by. Yeah, took a minute to grind off the remaining tube from that drive shaft, so we got our whole yoke assembly here free and clear. Hopefully I did not booger this up too much to where it might not be usable by a shop, or even me for that matter. But yeah, it is what it is. Another thing, got our starter in. Had to do some Mickey Mousing with the cable for the starter, but we got it all hooked up. Another thing to make note of, that exhaust manifold, both sides, they actually have a short piece of flange pipe already attached to them, so we didn't even need our junkyard pieces, which for all intents is kind of a good thing. All I need to do is just get some couplings from the auto parts store and just start adding pipe to these things and start building an exhaust system. Well, we're in our exhaust system phase of the project, and bought some stuff from the auto parts store and had to do some lining up of things. But on our little short flange pipes underneath, I put one of these little flared adapters on here, but I welded it to this 45 angle. So we'll go under here and look real quick, and right there where our flange is at, our flange pipe end, I'll put this piece on so we can get it to come out from there up to there. So give me a quick second, and there we go. Put that piece in. It lines up with our cross member where we can get a straight shot from that pipe on through here. And get my hand here so I can point. We'd be able to come straight through, right over the top of the cross member and heading on to the back. So got this one done. Just have to throw a few little welds around where the fitting, the flare fitting, is over the flange pipe end, and tighten up a couple other things on the manifold, and then do the other side. And then I could actually start making some real pipe runs with the junk we have over there. So again, stand by. One of the things I forgot to cover from our last session approximately a year ago was the completion of our seats. When we had left off with those seats, I was basically butchering a couple of seat frames from the minivan that we also butchered to make a chicken coop. But I actually did complete the butchering and re-welding of those seat frames in order to remount these VW seats so it'll actually sit at a good enough angle where my head is not in the ceiling. And go over here too, look at that. Both seats have full function as far as forward and backward, and of course the seats recline and everything. Seats do need some cleaning because, well, tried to spray some crap on there to disinfect them and it stained the seats, but seats were already stained, so whatever. But yeah, just a quick aside. We finished our seat frames and have that done. They've long since been done. But another thing we will look at, if you give me a quick second. We pretty much have both of our flange pipes done. Well, the elbows are welded to the flange pipes on both sides there, as you can see. So we're actually ready to start installing our extended exhaust system. Well, I got one side done. Had to do all kinds of cutting and fitting and chopping the pipes at angles to weld them in different spots, different angles, whatever. But I finally got it. Got our muffler hung right there. That little clamp right there is actually holding the strap that's holding the entire rear of the muffler and exhaust system in place. A bolt is holding that strap inside the cab area. And we got a piece of fence post for exhaust pipe right here, going all the way over here where I had to do some crap right here with all these different angles of pipe welded together and everything in order to fit it into our elbow right there. But it's all in place, one side that is. Still got the other side to do, so I'll spare you the headache of that crap and just get that done so we can conclude this. But on a lighter note, because of the placement of the muffler and the exhaust end of the muffler, that's pretty much going to be the end of the exhaust system right there. There ain't going to be no axle pipe or elbow coming out of the side or anything like that because the placement is just bad. If I wanted to do all that fancy stuff, I'd have to get different mufflers specifically for doing these kinds of fancy exhausts routed out of the side and all that. We ain't doing that. We're using what we got. So yeah, let me finish this shit. Well, I finally got our exhaust system done. I didn't even have to add as much extra crap as I did before on the other side. I had the S pipe that I had to add in right there. Got our clamp right there, similar to the other side. But at the front here, all I had to do was just add a short piece of pipe I already had that slid right on into the elbow, and I just welded it at a slight angle so our straight pipe would be fully connected. I also put a clamp on that elbow on the flared end to more or less crimp it, in addition to the little crappy weld that I put on there. So that's all done on there. Now, one other thing I want to show you. Give me a quick minute. Let me get up off the ground. I ended up cutting a hole on the passenger side here, similar to the driver's side, in what I like to call our trunk area, because in order to hang the hanger for the exhaust pipe, I had to get access to this area right here to put that bolt right there in place. This is just as well that I did this anyway, because now I can more utilize this open area behind the seats. I will have to grind this all down to make it a little less cutting. Maybe put something on there like some rubber hose or whatever, but That'll be a later thing. I just have to do it before I inadvertently run my arm across it and slice my arm open. But yeah, had to do all that. So for all intents, exhaust is done. We can now turn back to the engine bay. Stand by. Well, because our starter has the solenoid on board and I can't get under there really quickly to put our remote starter thing on there, I just simply spliced the wire into the wire going down to the solenoid in order to hook the remote starter up. And of course, pull off the plug at number 1 cylinder so I could crank this thing over so I could find top dead center, which I'm about to get ready to do. So I can go ahead and try to set these plugs up. Of course, I will have to do that off camera because I only have 2 hands and not 3, so give me a minute. Okay, where that rotor is pointing is pretty much going to be slightly after where we need to put our wire at. Since the rotation's clockwise, I'm gonna have to put our number 1 wire like the next lug before it would have hit that point right there. And that'll be where our starting point is when we do try to crank this thing. So let's go ahead and get that out of the way. Another little thing that I thought I'd take care of real quick was mounting our bumper right there. Had to fabricate a couple of mounts out of some scrap metal because it seems like bumper mounts for a 76 Elco are hard to find. So, yep, scrap metal, a bunch of welding, and I came up with that garbage right there. This one's for the right side because we already have the left side mounted in place, holding the left side of the bumper up. Everything's grade 8 bolts on there. So hopefully this shit will hold on enough that it won't drop my bumper like a large, long landmine on the ground while driving. Obviously, this bumper, even though it has a hitch thing on here, well, it's a broken hitch, but I could put one on there. With this type of setup, I'm not pulling anything with this. So, yeah, I'll go ahead and put this mount on, get this bumper fully secured so I could get that hunk of 2x4 out of the way and write off this bumper as part of the car officially. Stand by. All right, we got our bumper fully mounted and it's nice and sturdy, ready to stay in place, I'm hoping. But that's all said and done. So now our next thing that we need to address if we want to even try to hear this thing make noise is valve lash adjustments. So let's go over there. All right, to do valve lash adjustments, it's kind of simple, a little bit drawn out, no biggie, but put a breaker bar on our crank pulley down there, rotate the engine until you watch your push rods on your rocker arms go back down into the head, indicating that there is no upward pressure from the lifter on the push rod and hence on the rocker arm. And you'll notice that because there'll be a lot of play in those particular, need to put that back, but there will be a lot of play in the rocker arm. And with the zero tension or pressure or however you want to put it, you then tighten these big nuts here down just enough to where the push rod has tension on it or resistance, but you could still rotate it. You also don't want all the floppiness in the rocker arm too. And you still want to be able to rotate the push rod enough to indicate that it's loose but snug. Now, the professional way is to use a feeler gauge and get whatever specs to let you know how many thousandths of an inch clearance you should have between the actual valve tip and the rocker arm. But this is a preliminary thing just to get this engine ready to actually start up. Now, I'm sure anybody can probably attest to a shade tree saying that they didn't go through all that. They just did what I was talking about to get the thing running which, yeah, you can get away with it, but for long-term longevity, you really want to do it the right way. But we're not going to do that right now because I want to get this stupid thing running. So let me go ahead and do this adjustment crap here and get these valve covers back on, snug down and all that, get some petrol in here, and see if this thing will fire up. So, as usual, stand by. Alright, we got our valve covers on here nice and snug with rubber gaskets so they should not leak. And we have all our other stuff ready for a startup. We have our little push button thingy for the starter. We have our fuel pump plugged back up, about 5 gallons of petrol in the tank, so that should be more than enough to be able to run this thing. And we have fluids everywhere it needs to be, not on the ground. So, and we have a hot battery. So we should be ready to see if we can make some noise. So let's go ahead and see what happens. Stand by. Okay, as we can tell, this engine sounds like pure D shit. Whether it's from sitting, whether this thing was just on its way out. Last time I heard this engine run, it never sounded like that, but I mean, hey, shit can happen after a while. Shit can rust, shit can degrade. It's been a while since this engine actually ran, and that is horrible. Man. Ugh. It literally sounds like this thing is trying to destroy itself from the inside out. Let's see, just for shits and giggles, what our gauges are showing. Nothing yet. Hasn't really heated up yet. Well, I don't know what to say, but it runs, and it sounds horrible. Like I said, sounds like it's trying to destroy itself from the inside out, so that means I'm going to have to go inside this thing. More than likely, we're probably going to be looking at an engine overhaul. But, yeah, it does start up, but that's neither here or there. I think we're going to leave it off at that because, well, yeah, not much else we could say about this. So, yeah, I'm going to regroup here and figure out my next plan of action and probably try a few other little things to see if I can alleviate this self-destructive way of running on this engine. And I'll get back to you on that. So, till the next time, as usual, know what to do. Like, subscribe, all that stuff, and see more destructive car shenanigans on the channel. Let's see if we could possibly save this piece of crap. Stay tuned, stand by. Let's see what happens later. I'm out.